By the dawn of the first millennium AD, Igbo society had merged into its distinct cultural groups, and the archaeological records begin to show evidence of organized, wealthy communities. The most striking discovery from this era is at Igbo Ukwu, a site in Anambra State, where in the 9th century AD, an elite residence or shrine was richly furnished with bronze regalia and other luxury items. The Igbo Ukwu finds hundreds of finely made cast bronzes, copper ornament, beads, and ceramics reveal that an indigenous bronze metalworking industry had developed in Igboland by at least AD 800 to 900. Early scholars were astonished by the technical sophistication of this artifact and initially thought they must have been made elsewhere, but it was later proven they were produced locally by Igbo artisans. Before we go into today's historical account, let's take a quick journey back. In this series, we began by uncovering the earliest origins of the Igbo people, tracing archaeological evidence that stretches as far back as 100,000 years ago in Igboland. We then explored the many theories and oral traditions of Igbo origins, looking at what historians, elders, and myths say about where the Igbo truly came from. If you missed any of those episodes, I encourage you to check them out. They will give you the full picture of how Igbo identity was shaped across time. And while you are here, please remember to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, share with others, and subscribe. That is what keeps our channel alive and allow us to keep bringing you these deep histories that deserve to be told. Igbo Ukwu's treasure are believed to be associated with the Kingdom of Nri, a priestly Igbo domain that oral history says was founded in the same era. The Nri kingdom, which arose around the 10th century AD, is often described as the cradle of Igbo culture, religion, and scholarship. According to Igbo lore, Nri's founder was Eri, a seminal figure, sometimes regarded as a demigod or divinely sent cultural hero. Umunri, people of Nri's tradition, recounts that Eri came down from heaven at a spot in the Anambra River Valley at Eri Aka, near present-day Aguleri. There he established the first settlement and began to civilize the people, teaching them agriculture, religion, and social norms. In Metic accounts, when Eri arrived, the land was flooded, so he appealed to Chukwu, who sent blacksmiths from Oka to dry the land with bellows. When there was no food, Chukwu commanded Eri to sacrifice his children, after which yam and cocoyam, which are staple crops, grew from their burial spots. This rich creation myth encodes Igbo values, the importance of yam, the role of smith, and the idea of divine mandates. Historically, the Eze Nri, the king of Nri, became a revered priest king among the northern Igbo. Nri's influence around the 11th to 16th centuries was not based on military conquest but on ritual authority and religious prestige. The Nri people were seen as custodians of Igbo spiritual law, such as cleansing abominations and preserving yam rituals, and spread a form of cultural unity across disparate Igbo villages. Nri is notable as one of the oldest continuous monarchy in Nigeria. Traditional king list dates back to the 10th century and it endured with interruptions until the 20th century. Under Nri's influence, cultural practices like the Ozo title system, the Ichi, facial scarification signifying nobility, and certain masquerade cults became widespread, helping to forge a common Igbo identity out of many communities. It is important to note that Igboland was never a single centralized kingdom. Alongside Nri's sacred leadership, many Igbo communities remain acephalous without kings, governing themselves through republican councils of elders, age grades, and priests. This pattern led the Igbo to be famously described as having no kings, Igbo Enweze, a testament to their preference for village-level autonomy. Still, the shared language and cultural meant ideas circulated freely. Through trade and pilgrimage to Nri, the Igbo villages maintained a cultural coherence even without political unity. While Nri dominated the spiritual sphere in northern and central Igboland, other parts of Igboland had their own origin stories and migratory traditions. In western Igboland, Across the Niger River in today's Delta State, there is the legend of Chima, a prince of Benin who fled eastward in the 16th century. According to this account, Chima and his followers left the Benin kingdom after a dispute with the Oba of Benin around the 1560s. Crossing the Niger, they settled among the Igbo, intermarried and founded new communities. Towns such as Onitsha, Oguta and others often cite this Benin origin legend, calling themselves Chima, children of Chima. This story, while based on a specific historical migration, highlights that Igbo society was open and absorptive. Even newcomers from a different ethnicity could be integrated and become Igbo over time. In fact, Igbo frontier towns like Onitsha adopted some Benin-style kingship. Onitsha still has a king, the Obi, tracing back to Benin, which is a notable exception in Igboland's otherwise egalitarian political landscape. In southern Igboland, the areas nearer the Cross River Basin, oral histories often speaks of migration from a place called Isu in central Igbo territory. Spreading south and east, many clans in today's Imo and Abia state trace their lineage to Isu ancestors who moved out generations ago. This Isu migration is sometimes linked to the fragmentation of an earlier Igbo Earthland community. Yet, even in the far south, some groups insist they are indigenous. For example, the Mbaise and some parts of Arochukwu area claim they sprouted from the fairy soil, that is, they are aboriginals with no migration, underscoring again the mix of narratives in Igbo country. One of the most significant developments in later pre-colonial Igbo history was the rise of the Aro Confederacy in the 17th to 18th centuries. Based in the town of Arochukwu on the Cross River fringe, the Aro Confederacy was an alliance led by Igbo groups, the Ezeagu clan and others, in partnership with Eastern Cross River peoples. According to tradition, Igbo settlers in Arochukwu allied with Akpa warriors and overthrew the indigenous Ibibio kingdoms of that area after a protracted conflict, the Aro Ibibio Wars. The Aro leaders then established a new sacred oracle shrine, the famous Ibini Ukpabi, or Long Juju of Arochukwu, and used its influence to build a trading empire. By the 18th century, the Aro Confederacy had become the economic powerhouse of the region, serving as the middleman in the flourishing Atlantic slave trade. Aro merchant priests traveled throughout Igboland and beyond, using their oracle spiritual authority and a network of colonies called Aro colonies in many Igbo communities to facilitate the procurement of slaves, which they sold to European traders on the coast. This period tragically saw hundreds of thousands of Igbo people caught up in the slave raids. In fact, the Igbo became one of the principal ethnic groups enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade. It is estimated that around 1.3 million Igbo, roughly 14% of all enslaved Africans, were taken from the Bight of Biafran region in the 17th to 19th centuries. The term Igbo in slave records specifically referred to Igbo captives. The diaspora of Igbo people in the Americas left enduring cultural footprints. From Igbo words in Jamaica patois to the remembered story of Igbo landing in the United States, a famous 1803 incident of Igbo slaves rebelling and drowning themselves in Georgia. Despite the upheavals of the slave trade, Igbo society remained resilient and maintained its unique character. European explorers who encountered the Igbo in the 19th century remarked on the region's dense population, intense farming, especially yam cultivation, and its egalitarian social structure. They also noted the various spelling of Igbo, such as Igbo, Igbo, or Igbo, in their writings. By the late 19th century, British colonial forces were pushing into Igboland, but they met determined resistance. The Igbo famously had no central kings to surrender to the British, so conquest had to be done village by village, often violently. Igbo women and men alike fought colonial encroachment. For example, the protracted Ekumeku resistance of 1880s to 1900s in Anioma, Western Igboland, saw Igbo guerrilla groups battle the British, and later the Aba Women's War of 1929 showed Igbo women mobilizing against colonial policies. By 1910, however, Igboland had been subjugated and incorporated into British Nigeria. The ancient heritage of the Igbo continues to shape their identity in modern Nigeria. Colonial rule and the traumatic Nigerian Biafran Civil War of 1967 to 1970 disrupted Igbo history but also galvanized interest in the deeper past as a source of pride. After Nigeria's independence, Igbo scholars redoubled efforts to uncover their early history, leading to the excavation at Igbo Ukwu by Thurston Shaw and ongoing archaeological work at sites like Leja, which collectively have validated the antiquity of the Igbo that Afikpo and others spoke of. Today, the Igbo people thrive as one of Nigeria's 3 largest ethnic groups, noted for their entrepreneurial spirit and rich culture. They remain primarily in their ancestral lands in Abia, Anambra, Ebonyi, Enugu, Imo, and neighboring states. The same green heartland where their forebears developed agriculture, smelted iron, cast bronze masterpieces, and told stories of how the world began. So, credible historical evidence from ancient pottery shards and iron slags to the spectacular bronzes of Igbo Ukwu to the consistent thread of Igbo oral tradition all points to an indigenous evolution of the Igbo people in what is now southeastern Nigeria. Over millennia, the transition from Stone Age foragers to Iron Age farmers formed localized clans and impressed kingdoms like Nri and engaged with wider trade networks without losing their social autonomy. The Igbo story is one of continuity and complexity, a people deeply rooted in their ancestral soil, yet never isolated from the currents of history. As research continues, with new findings still emerging from the field, we come ever closer to the real history of the Igbo, a history that is every bit as remarkable and authentic as the legends that surrounds it. This is where we pause our journey for now. We have seen how the Igbo people built their identity from deep antiquity through their kingdoms and cultural achievement, and how their stories continues to inspire. Next week, we will move beyond Igboland to their neighbors, the Ijaw people of the Niger Delta. This is a community whose history is often overlooked in mainstream narratives, yet they play the central role in Nigeria's history, from riverine kingdoms to colonial resistance. So make sure you don't miss it. Like, share and subscribe to support this channel to keep African history alive. And in the comments, tell us what surprised you the most in Igbo History series. We would love to hear your thoughts.